and welcome to The Book Was Better. We're watching today's movies one book at a time. And I have a question for you. Alice in Wonderland. Strange lucid dream or drug-addled descent into madness? Though it's now one of the most celebrated kids' stories around, having appeared in dozens of different cartoons, movies, TV shows, and even a strange brand of video games, when the book first came out, it was poorly received. The illustrations by John Tenniel received better praise than the prose did, and it wasn't until Through the Looking Glass came out that Alice started to receive any kind of popular attention. Alice's Adventures in Wonderland, as is the actual title of the book, was first published in 1865 by Charles Ludwig Dodson, using the pen name Lewis Carroll.
Dodson! Dodson! We've got Dodson here!
Although Alice is considered a kid's book, it actually contains a lot of things you might not expect in a kid's book, like logical discussions, mathematics, drugs, and historical allusions. Half the fun of reading this book and the sequel, Through the Looking Glass, is discovering what the symbolism and inside jokes all meant. Like Gulliver's Travels before it, Alice's Adventures in Wonderland has never been out of print, and, at least in my opinion, had a very similar feel to Jonathan Swift's classic. In a similar vein, this movie has been extremely influential in modern stories, with details, references, and jokes coming up all over the place.
Now, look at this next entry. It's the kicker. White rabbit object. Whatever it did it all.
Now, there have been over 100 versions of the book printed in English, and way too many movies made of this story to count. Thank you, public domain. But today, we'll be focusing on the 2010 version directed by Tim Burton and starring Johnny Depp, Mia Wasikowska, Anne Hathaway, Helena Bonham Carter, Stephen Fry, and Alan Rickman. I chose this version in particular because it's probably the version most people would think about, aside from the older Disney cartoon, and also because it somehow made over $1 billion in the box office. However, I have to wonder about that when some of the mishaps of this movie are obvious before you even open the DVD case. Look, they have the Mad Hatter front and center with Alice shoved unceremoniously off to the side. I know Johnny Depp was reaching his peak when this came out, and he's the reason a lot of people went to the theater, but can we at least treat the main character like she's the main character? So just how dark and twisted will Tim Burton make Wonderland? Well, let's find out for ourselves as we fall down the rabbit hole into Alice in Wonderland. The story really starts with Alice, played by Mia Wasikowska, and her mother riding along to some fancy party. And by fancy party, I mean an insanely boring one. All the dresses look identical, and everyone looks like they've either shoved a broom up their ass or they're someone's inbred cousin. And it doesn't help that Alice is expected to be engaged to this blue blood dandy.
Alice, Hamish is waiting to dance with you. Go.
Are you sure? Because he might be a little hungover for that.
Where's the ice?
No, this Hamish is some guy who literally walks around staring down his nose at people.
Pardon us, sir. Miss Kingsley's distracted today. Where's your head?
You're leading the dance, jackass! Now, this scene exists to do more than just introduce Alice and her problems. It also shows that she's supposed to be some sort of visionary, although this type of character has been done so many times it no longer stands out.
And no stockings.
I'm against them.
But you're not properly dressed.
Who's to say what is proper? What if it was agreed that proper was wearing a codfish on your head? Would you wear it?
Alice.
And it shows several allegories to later characters, all pretty obvious in delivery.
Perhaps we shouldn't. If we decided we should. If we tell her, she won't be surprised. Will you be surprised?
Imbeciles. The gardeners have planted white roses when I specifically asked for red.
You have a caterpillar on your shoulder.
You?
Oh, they're just missing a cat with a really wide grin and they've got all the major parts down.
Most everyone's mad here.
However, through the morning, Alice spots the white rabbit running through the gardens, and when Hamish finally proposes, she hesitates and decides to run after the rabbit instead of giving an answer. Now, it probably goes without saying that none of this was in the book. In the first book, Alice is playing by the river while her sister reads a book without pictures. Then she follows the white rabbit in a waistcoat down a hole and thus starts her adventures from there. I can understand expanding the intro like this to give the movie more flavor, even if it is really obvious foreshadowing. The movie tries to tie in real life with the fantasy of Wonderland in an attempt to help Alice grow as a person, but as we'll see later on, that turns out to be a complete failure. Normally I like to wait until later to discuss characters, but I wanted to take a moment out to discuss Alice's portrayal here because it starts boring and ends boring. Starting out, you can understand her muted performance since that's just the world she lives in. However, she never reacts to anything within Wonderland with any degree of, well, wonder. everything is either mildly confusing or Alice is just stuck eliciting
Dull surprise!
Just look, she discovers a bizarre group of creatures in a world where logic and reason are thrown out the window.
Dull surprise!
She shrinks to the size of a grapefruit and gets tossed around on some weirdo's hat.
Dull surprise!
She faces down the Bandersnatch.
Dull surprise!
And she supposedly grows through this adventure, but her betrayal remains exactly the same at the end.
Don't worry, Mother. I'll find something useful to do with my life.
Well, I think we found why the Mad Hatter takes center stage on the DVD case. This Alice is written like some blank slate character that the audience is supposed to project themselves onto. God, this is gonna suck. Anyway, Alice falls down the rabbit hole until she achieves terminal velocity, and then somehow doesn't get crushed into a pancake when she crashes through the ceiling of some random room. And we all remember this from the classic Disney cartoon. She drinks the stuff and she shrinks, she eats the cake and she grows. We know where this is going. What you might not know is that Carroll was informed that eating mushrooms gave one a sense of displacement, as if one were shrinking or growing. There's your drug reference. So far, this hasn't been a bad adaptation of the original story. That changes when Alice gets out of the house and runs into the White Rabbit, the Dormouse, and Tweedledum and Tweedledee, all at the same time.
I told you she's the right Alice.
I am not convinced.
How is that for gratitude? I've been up there for weeks, trailing one Alice after the next, and I was almost eaten by other animals.
Not only does the rabbit apparently want Alice to follow him, but he and everyone else present are all part of a resistance group of sorts fighting against the Red Queen. This is different from the book, of course, but in more ways than one. For starters, the Dormouse was introduced in the Mad Hatter's Tea Party, in which he was constantly falling asleep, not being this chivalric knight. Next, there wasn't any kind of resistance group against the Red Queen. She did threaten to execute a lot of people, but her husband the king would always pardon them, something which the movie does actually acknowledge.
I had to do it. You would have left me.
And of course, the Tweedle brothers were introduced in the second book, Through the Looking Glass. So if this were to be a more faithful adaptation of Adventures in Wonderland, they shouldn't even be here. And yeah, if we're being strict, this is something the old cartoon version screwed up as well, but the characters are classics in their own way, so keeping them is not really a horrible sin against the story.
Resolve this for us, Absalom. Is she the right Alice?
Apparently the resistance group needs the right Alice for some prophesized battle, and to make sure they have the right her, they go to Absalom, a caterpillar played by Alan Rickman.
Who are you?
Absalom?
You're not Absalom, I'm Absalom. The question is, who are you?
Alice.
We shall see.
It's here that Absalom reveals the main plot of the story using the scroll called the Orichalcum or something.
The Oraculum.
Whatever. Basically, it's a scroll that predicts the future. And it predicts that soon, Alice will slay a monster known as the Jabberwocky. And frankly, I take issue with this, and not just because this never happened in the books. Now, this is gonna sound weird, but hear me out. The movie's biggest problem as an adaptation is that it has a plot. I know. Crimson, you can't complain about a story having a plot. That's stupid. You've got to have a plot. Well, sort of. The Oraculum creates a sense of order within the world of Wonderland, something which the books sorely lacked. See, in the original book, Alice just wandered from strange thing to strange thing, pointing out how weird it all was as she did. There was no overall story or character arcs, it was just an odd exploration of this strange new world. And that's fine. Carroll still managed to put Alice through the world of Wonderland and keep it entertaining throughout. Alice didn't see any kind of plot until Through the Looking Glass, and even then, that book was a loosely connected series of events that Alice went through in her journey to become a queen. The movie, however, disregards this and not only adds in plot elements that never existed in the books, but significantly changes Alice's naive and calm character from the books to that of an action hero. And it's not even a fitting change. This is like watching Kermit the Frog turn into a violent cult leader.
Persecute the non-believers! Yay!
Back to the movie, Alice denies being able to slay the Jabberwocky, and she's accused of somehow being the wrong Alice. And then we get a series of scenes introducing many characters of Wonderland that we all know and love, starting with the Red Queen.
Someone has stolen three of my tarts!
Ah yes, and because we have Johnny Depp in a movie, we must have Helena Bonham Carter. I swear, as soon as Depp gets cast in a movie, Carter is tied by contract to get a role too. The Red Queen starts off well, getting overexcited with her lust for executions.
Did you steal my tarts?
No, Your Majesty.
Squimberry juice.
I was so hungry! I didn't mean
Open his head!
And then she too tumbles into the pratfall that is this movie's plot. This guy, the Knave of Hearts, reveals the oraculum to the Red Queen, who discovers that Alice is destined to slay the Jabberwocky.
I'd know that tangled mess of hair anywhere. Is it Alice?
I believe it is.
Rather than get absorbed into the nonsense that is Wonderland, the Red Queen instead decides to have Alex hunted down before the prophecy can come true. And the movie tries to be weird with this, but it just isn't up to snuff with the book.
Dogs will believe anything.
Meanwhile, the members of the resistance group get captured, and Alice is forced to wander by herself when we meet two more notable characters. The first is the Cheshire Cat, who notices the Bandersnatch's cut on Alice's arm.
What are you doing?
It needs to be purified by someone with evaporating skills, or it will fester and putrefy.
Okay, I remember the Cheshire Cat being goofy and whimsical. This guy terrifies me! The grin is creepy enough, but the sly, sinister tone voiced by Stephen Fry makes me worry that Alice is about to get assaulted in a back alley behind a Denny's.
What do you call yourself?
Alice.
The Alice?
There's been some debate about that.
I never get involved in politics.
As we'll see later on, the Cheshire Cat gets involved in politics and this little revolution constantly, even volunteering to become the White Queen's champion when she announces a call to action. And as we'll see, he's really powerful, and that grin is really sinister.
Well, you know what time it is!
The cat leads Alice to Johnny Depp, playing the Mad Hatter. He is in fact so mad that his eyes change color when he drops his accents.
Have you any idea why a raven is like a writing desk? Anyone could go by horse or rail, but the absolute best way to travel is by hat. He lifted did, and with its head, he went galumphing back.
Shookum juggling, slurking your fault. Barlow mock hagbrun!
What's wrong with you, Tarrant? You used to be the life of the party. You used to do the best futterwhack and then all of wit's end.
Futter what?
It's a dance.
Oh, thank God. By the name, I thought they were making a masturbation joke.
When the White Queen once again wears the crown, on that day, I shall futterwhacken vigorously.
Futterwhacking. It's not masturbation. As the Hatter takes Alice along, traveling by hat, he recites one of my favorite poems from the book.
The Jabberwock with eyes of flame, jaws that bite and claws that catch. Beware the Jabberwock, my son, on the frumious Bandersnatch.
This poem was likely the inspiration for the entire plotline of this movie, which is weird because Alice never encounters a Jabberwocky or a Bandersnatch in the book.
It's all about you, you know.
The Hatter tells Alice of the day the Red Queen took over, using the ferocious Jabberwocky to dethrone the White Queen, despite apparently having a scroll that can predict the future with 100% accuracy. This scene also includes a young Moxie from the Borderland video game series. However, a chase scene occurs and the Hatter has to toss Alice away on his hat so that she can escape while he gets captured.
Down with the bloody Red Queen!
So after escaping from the guards, Alice enlists the help of the Bloodhound who the guards have been using to track her, who also got away from the guards. Does anyone want to explain this little plot hole? Alice decides that she needs to save the Mad Hatter from the Red Queen and rides to her castle, where she runs into the White Rabbit again.
I've come to rescue the Hatter.
You're not rescuing anyone being the size of a gerbil.
Would you have any more of that cake that made me grow before?
Uppelkutschen? Actually, I might have some left.
So then Alice grows up.
I tower over everyone in Umbridge. They laugh at me. So I've come to you, hoping you might understand what it's like.
My dear girl, anyone with a head that large is welcome in my court. Someone find us some clothes. Use the curtains if you must, but clothe this enormous girl.
Yeah, this is all fine and good, except earlier, the Red Queen said this.
I'd know that tangled mess of hair anywhere. Is it Alice?
A person drawn on paper with at least 10 years difference from the last time you saw her? Totally recognizable. That same person standing 5 feet in front of you? Completely foreign! Thanks to her size, Alice gains the Queen's trust and is allowed to roam the castle of her own accord. And thanks to that, she is able to not only find the Hatter, but discovers the Vorpal sword she'll need to kill the Jabberwocky, and she befriends the Bandersnatch as well, by returning his missing eyeball. She isn't able to save the Hatter, who is now set to be executed, but Alice is able to get the Vorpal Sword of the White Queen.
There's a March hare here.
You're late for your soup, you wee bosom.
Could use some salt.
Thank God NPC doesn't cook like that. Anne Hathaway gives a flighty performance for the White Queen, walking with her arms awkwardly outstretched like some upper-own-ass hippie wandering blindly around a garden.
It is against my vows to harm any living creature.
And lines like that don't help. The White Queen from the book didn't really have much of a personality since she wasn't around for long, so the movie didn't have a lot to draw on. But still, why this odd performance? This doesn't strike me as Carolinian, this is more...
Yeah, alright, weird for the sake of weird. Oh!
Meanwhile, the Hatter is about to get decapitated.
I'd like to keep it on.
Suit yourself, as long as I can get at your neck.
But of course, things aren't that simple.
Good morning, everyone.
Okay, exactly how powerful is the Cheshire Cat? The vanishing is canon, but now he can transform into other people and mimic their voices? The only reason people follow the Red Queen is because she can summon the Jabberwocky on them at any time. I bet the Cheshire Cat could have ended this war a long time ago by turning into the Jabberwocky, denouncing the Red Queen in front of a crowd, and then biting her in half.
I never get involved in politics.
Yo, he just got involved in politics by substituting himself for the Mad Hatter. I call bullshit! Instead, he and the Hatter inspire an uprising within the Red Queen's court, escaping to join the White Queen. Alice wanders around the White Queen's garden when she runs into Absalom again, and he imparts some sage wisdom unto her.
You were just as dim-witted the first time you were here. You called it Wonderland, as I recall.
Wonderland.
Okay, so the nostalgia critic already raised some good points as far as the inaccuracy of the title, but I wanted to go more in depth as to the purpose of the story. Making a sequel to Alice in Wonderland, I get. Making a reboot of Alice in Wonderland, I get. But why the hell would you try to do both at the same time? In a great many ways, this is a point-by-point retelling of the old Disney cartoon and, to a lesser extent, the book. And yet, this is also Alice's second time coming to Wonderland. By combining the two, Alice looks like some dim-witted amnesiac. So, are we to believe that she went through at least some of this adventure before and just can't remember any of it? If she grew up and just chalked it up to being a dream or something from her imagination, and then remember certain characters and events as she encounters them later, the idea might still work. But Alice wanders around proclaiming that this is all just a dream she's experiencing for the first time, despite ample evidence to the contrary.
This is my dream. I'm going to wake up now and you'll all disappear. Ow! It's only a dream. Nothing can hurt me.
But this is my dream. I'll decide where it goes from here.
I like you,
You seem so real. Sometimes I forget that this is all a dream.
Will you stop doing that?
You still believe this is a dream, do you?
Of course.
Maybe Tim Burton wanted to try something different by making a sequel and a remake at the same time, but there are far too many missteps taken along the way. The land doesn't feel the same, and the very theme of the world doesn't match the wonder of the books, and Alice is still boring as hell! And this dismissive attitude is unlike what Alice was like in the book. Instead of proclaiming that everything around her was a dream and, by extension, unimportant, Alice in the book took everything in Wonderland as strange, but still real. The childish wonder complemented the story, which is a lot more than what can be said for this Alice's stubborn ignorance. So the eve of battle is upon our heroes, and Alice is decked out in some shiny new armor, armed with a Vorpal sword. Now, if you've been paying attention, you might be asking why doesn't Alice, or the entire army for that matter, eat some of that growth cake and stomp the Red Queen's army flat? Well, it's because this battle will center around Alice and the Jabberwocky, and Alice had to shrink down so she could fit into the proper armor. I didn't say it was a good answer. Both armies meet on the battlefield, which is this extremely large chessboard, and this leads me away from the battle and more into the subtle touches that the movie got right. This chessboard could very well be a reference to the chessboard that Alice had to cross in through the looking glass in order to turn herself from a pawn into a queen. Likewise, the chess pieces in the White Queen's army are a nice reference to the same chessboard and the pieces that Alice encountered in her second journey. They also contrast well with the Red Queen's card army, though they really should be clubs instead of hearts since the club deck were the soldiers. Or maybe it's all a coincidence and I'm just looking at it too hard. The battle commences, and I gotta say, for all the movie's faults thus far, I do like the Jabberwocky's reveal and overall design. It's menacing and dangerous, even if it should be more than a match for Alice. She only started believing this world was real a few hours ago when she has no training of any kind, so this comes off as a rush to make her an action hero when there was really no need. Once Alice engages the Jabberwocky, all hell breaks loose and everyone gets a moment to shine in battle. And I'd like to enjoy it, except the core concept of the battle is a political struggle, which is too logical a reason to fight in this world. If this were to be more faithful to the book, then this whole war should be over something frivolous, like when the Tweedle brothers went to battle because one broke the other's new rattle. So, one unbelievable battle later...
Sometimes, I believe as many as 6 impossible things before breakfast.
No! There was no character arc to build up to this moment. You do not get to use that as an excuse. Alice defeats the Jabberwocky after a few minutes of battle with a surprisingly gory finish.
Off with your head!
Fatality.
Look, you can even see the spinal column. So, with the Red Queen's champion dead, she is deposed and exiled by her sister. Oh, yeah, and the Hatter gets to do his little dance. And this is what the movie's been building up to. It'd be less awkward if he actually was masturbating. Alice then decides to say goodbye to her friends and depart for London once again.
You won't remember me.
Of course I will. How could I forget?
I didn't stop you before! So Alice leaves Wonderland and returns to the surface, where she's a different person, I guess. I mean, I guess she's more confident, but she's still as boring as before.
Oh, and one more thing.
Snap? So Alice goes into trading, like her father before her, and sets sail on the... Wonder, as a random butterfly lands on her shoulder.
Hello, Epsilon.
And that was Alice in Wonderland. There's a bunny on my head and a Deadpool where my book used to be. Because fuck reason! There seems to be a lot of spit and polish on this movie, just judging by a few choice scenes, but once you look into it, it's a bit of a mess. Visually it's not bad, and it's the type of movie that'll keep kids entertained. However, the main character is incredibly boring, and most of the characters come off as flat. Alice serves more as a blank vehicle that the audience can project themselves onto, rather than her own character. And a lot of the time, the other characters just come off like they're putting on a show. They act zany because they're supposed to be zany, not because they are zany. And the world of Wonderland is so similar to our own that outside of the characters, there's no real difference. The movie gets a 2 out of 5. Alice's Adventures in Wonderland and Through the Looking Glass were some of those classic titles that I've been looking forward to for quite some time. I'm glad to say that they've lived up to their reputations. Alice was a curious little girl, usually pointing out the inconsistencies of Wonderland, with a little character of her own, but that still served the story well because she was intended to be more of a vehicle to carry the audience along. Something that I really liked was the strange illogical logic that ran the world of Wonderland. For example, when Alice meets the Cheshire Cat, she asks, "Would you tell me please which way I ought to go from here?" That depends a good deal on where you want to get to. I don't much care where, then it doesn't matter which way you go, so long as I get somewhere. Oh, you're sure to do that, if only you walk long enough. It's clearly mad, but at the same time, it makes sense. Plus, going through this book, you get to see where many different story elements come from that are used in various other works. Hats off to the D&D players who got to use a Vorpal weapon. Classics like this should get a higher rating than normal, so the 2 Alice in Wonderland books both get an 8 out of 10. Rating movies as adaptations is always the hardest part of my reviews, and this movie is no exception, but for a reason different than most. I believe that Burton familiarized himself with the source material and tried to come up with his own interpretation. In many ways, he was on the right path. There are a ton of small moments, like with these rocking horseflies buzzing around, that were nice, subtle callbacks to Carroll's original work. However, he failed when he tried to come up with a plot. The core concept of the war is nothing like what we would have seen in the books, and, odd as this may all sound, it makes too much sense. Admittedly, writing a movie like this for modern audiences without a plot would have been a challenge, but it would have also been admirable if Burton could have pulled off such a feat. In my opinion, it'd be better than trying to write a sequel remake. As an adaptation, Alice in Wonderland gets a 2 out of 5. So we're starting 2017 off right with a fun book, but sadly there's one last nugget from the field of death that was 2016 that I feel we need to cover. And considering the recent loss of one of my favorite authors, I find it entirely appropriate that next month we'll be covering Richard Adams' Watership Down.
writing desk.
Because Edgar Allan Poe wrote on both. Used to smuggle us until the British killed him off his lucky charms.
Hi there!
Who the fuck are you?
Name's Slade. I'm just here for a drop-off.
The shop's closed. I'm not taking any more business today. Come back in the morning.
Oh, you'll want to see this. So far, this thing has teleported 2 men, 2 cats, and all their things through hell and back. And it exploded another man.
This thing blew up a man, and he brought it to my shop.
Just check it out.
I don't lollygag with exploding buttons. And come back in the morning. And bring cash. I don't work for free.
This isn't a job, it's a favor. I'm giving you a chance to study it. And if you ask nicely enough, meet the person who invented it.
I don't care.
This button reacts differently for each person who presses it. What you have there is an improbability drive.
Listen, Missy, I don't know what you're doing, but I'm not laughing. Now take your stupid exploding button and leave.
Oh, you should really check this out. There's a lot more in this world than you understand.
Feck.